Lord Maitreya describes a 6-step process. Where he describes a failure to perceive emptiness to all the suffering that we go through in the world. And this is one of the most important descriptions of how we suffer and why we suffer. So what are the 6 steps that Lord Maitreya enumerates describing the process whereby we suffer? The process whereby all the suffering in the world comes from.
Born with ignorance?
Nice.
Yeah.
One has a bakchak, which is a mental potential, a mental seed, right? To have grasping the self-existence from your past lives, right? I mean, we have a mind stream that exists. It has all of its imprints and karmic seeds, and in there are seeds to perceive things as self-existent, right? Bakchaks, mental impressions, right? 2 forms of grasping the self-existence.
Me and mine.
Me and mine, right? So we have bakchaks to see is the instant you're conceived, the instant you're born, whether you're a human or a bug or a crocodile or whatever, hungry ghost. Any sentient being that's not an Arya has the bakchak, the seed they're born with. The mind stream contains the seed to perceive self-existence, right? So that's the first step. And then what happens? So you're born with the seed.
Flowers.
Yeah, then they ripen, right? Ignorance activates the seeds. And these seeds infect every perception. It's not possible to perceive anything as an ordinary being without thinking of it as self-existent, without experiencing it as self-existent. There really is a plate of food sitting there. This really is a chocolate-covered pretzel filled with peanut butter. It really is good. Goodness, the pretzel, the peanut butter is inside the pretzel and the flavor is inside the peanut butter. Right? No. There is no peanut butter.
Like that.
From its own side. Right? There is peanut butter from my side. And my experience exists from my side. And peanut butter exists from me, from my side.
There's no peanut butter in the chocolate.
You got peanut butter in here? See what I'm talking about? No, never mind. It's the plant. Okay. So then what's next? So we have so ignorance activates these seeds, right? And then what's next?
Then they become attractive or unattractive to you.
Yeah, you're reading the notes.
And trying to remember what I just told you. Yeah.
Oh, you just taught it? Well, that's good. Yeah, so
I'm checking the notes to see if I'm wrong. But yeah.
We misunderstand things and we start to think, we go like, oh, a chocolate-covered peanut butter pretzel. It exists from its own side and I like it and it's on his plate and I want it, so I'll just take it off his plate. And then I stole it, right? So we start to see things as nice from their own side, desirable from their own side, or ugly or undesirable from their own side. And therefore, if it's undesirable, we try to avoid it and push it away. And if we see it as nice, we try to bring it into us, right? So we misunderstand that the enjoyment doesn't come from the object. The enjoyment comes from our mind and our past karma, right? And then what happens?
Because
ignorant liking and ignorant disliking, right? So we start to focus on things as if they exist from their own side. Like the first thought is, there is a chocolate-covered peanut butter pretzel here. So that's that step, right? And then we go, ooh, it's tasty. It is tasty. It has tastiness, right? It has sweetness, peanut butteriness, chocolatiness. I want it. Right? So that ignorance, thinking that it all resides in the object, right, starts. And then based upon that, what happens?
you do something,
Yeah, you collect karma, right? Do negativity to collect to get it. And then as a result of that, what happens?
Cycle.
Yeah, you perpetuate your suffering. You circle around samsara. Evil perpetuates itself, right? The natural reaction to what we don't like causes us to suffer. What's the natural reaction to something we don't like? Push it away. Do we care about how we push it away? Not usually. I'll yell at it, I'll hit it, I'll, deceive it, I'll whatever, right? And then, the natural reaction to trying to get rid of things we don't like causes us to experience them again, to, perpetuate that suffering, right? All right. Important process. How does Master Shantideva answer the concern that meditating upon emptiness might seem a little scary or feel a little scary? Well, first of all, if you get a weird explanation of emptiness, it can kind of feel a little disturbing. And anytime anyone is talking about emptiness or ultimate reality and they're not talking about ethics, it's an incomplete teaching and it's a suspect teaching. One or the other, right? So if someone's teaching weird ideas of emptiness, yeah, it can be a little scary. But Master Shantideva says, look, seeing things as self-existent is the cause of all the suffering in the world. So if you're frightened of something, look around. All of the wars, all of the murders, all of the tortures, all of the disease, all the cancer and leprosy and mutations and beatings and everything. All of it comes from seeing things as self-existent. So if you're going to be afraid of something, be afraid of seeing things as self-existent. He said emptiness is the antidote. The wisdom which realizes emptiness is the cause for the end of all the pain and suffering of the world. It's the cause to end all fear in the world. He said, so you must meditate upon it, and don't be backwards thinking that emptiness is the scary thing. Self-existence is truly the scary thing, and living without understanding and perceiving emptiness is actually scary. Okay. Name and define two forms of the tendency to grasp things as existing in truth, meaning self-existently, right? What are the two different ways we learn that things are self-existent? Oh, I just gave it.
One is learned, yes.
Thanks. Which we learn, these are cultural superstitions passed down through the generations, It's like the stork, at some point you stop believing in the stork that they told you about when you were a kid. And at some point you stop believing in God, perhaps, when they tell you about God, right? These are incomplete viewpoints that don't explain how things work, really, right? So, philosophical tenets, philosophical belief systems, right? Like we have the scientific atomic belief system, which says there's the smallest particle. If you can arrange the atoms in a certain way, you can be happy, right? If you can arrange the material matter of your world and your life in a certain way, you can be happy. I mean, I went through this as when I was in my first job out of college, I was just like, if I can just get a little faster a car, I'll be happier. And if I can get a little cuter a girlfriend, I'll be happier. And if I can just have a nicer restaurant, I'll be happier. If I can just have better clothes, I'll be happier. And it doesn't work. But that's our belief system and our ethos. Or, if I could just be more organic, I'll be happier. If I could just be more back to earth, I'll be happier. Or whatever it is. Everybody's got a thing that they're living by for their happiness, right? And none of them work. They're incomplete belief systems and viewpoints. They don't explain why things happen, and they're dysfunctional in that they don't lead to happiness. They're incomplete and dysfunctional worldviews that we learn and we adopt just because our culture taught them to us. And if we grew up in a different culture, we grew up on the other side of the planet, we'd have a completely different belief system, because it's learned. And then the other is the innate tendency to believe that things have their own nature. And that's existed in our mind from beginningless time. Possessed by all beings with normal minds. Has nothing to do with philosophical belief system, it's just seeds in the mind. At what point does a person in the Mahayana track eliminate each of these two types of self-existent view? So the learned form, when do you eliminate it? You eliminate it during the path of seeing, right? When you perceive emptiness directly. Like someone could say to you, if you just steal, you'll get rich. And then you see emptiness directly, and you see for a fact that it's not true. And so you eliminate that incorrect, learned belief system as a result of seeing emptiness directly. So seeing emptiness directly kills the first And then the second, the innate wrong view, that's during the 8th Bodhisattva Bhumi. The one eliminates the innate manifest form, eliminates the manifest form of the innate belief. Which means that you are getting rid of the seeds, the very subtle bakchaks and seeds in the mind stream, so that they no longer there's no longer even a seed to perceive anything as self-existent, which is then you're on the cusp of nirvana and enlightenment at that point. Okay.
During the 8th Bodhisattva what?
Oh, level 8th Bodhisattva level. It's called a bhumi. In Sanskrit is bhumi, B-H-U-M-I. There are 10 Bodhisattva levels that one goes. If one is on the Bodhisattva track, there are 10 Bodhisattva levels that one progresses through to reach enlightenment. And so the first Bodhisattva bhumi is what? Yeah, it's perceiving emptiness directly with bodhicitta in your heart. When you do that, you're on the first Bodhisattva level. And as you go through the 10, you're moving towards enlightenment, and then each of the first the next six relate to each of the 6 perfections. Is perfecting each of the 6 perfections. You go through another 6 Bodhisattva levels to make it such later. Okay. No Buddhist school agrees that there's a person distinct from the physical and mental parts of the person. Middle Way says we're not any one of our parts or the whole of our parts. It's easy to see we're not any one of our parts, like our arm, because if you lose your arm, you don't lose you, right? So that's obvious. But why is it the case that we're not the sum of our parts put together? I mean, like, if I add up all of my stuff, my arms and my legs and my fingers and my toes, my hair, isn't John there? So if you just add it all up, don't you get John?
Because you have to add the mental projection of John.
Right. Just having the parts is not enough to have John. You have to have the projection of John overlaid onto the parts. The parts themselves don't make John. Like that. Okay. So the image of the whole has to be imposed upon the parts by our projections, which are forced upon us by our past karma. Right? You know, this, as we did in our meditation at the beginning of class, there is a thought arising in the mind spontaneously, which happens because the karma has ripened, or a series of karmas have ripened. So karma's ripened, a thought arises spontaneously in the mind saying, that's John. And then you have John, imposed upon a basis or parts. Okay? At this point in the text, Master Shantideva moves from a major discussion of one kind of emptiness to another. The distinction between the two is the answer to a natural question raised in our minds when we begin to examine the emptiness of any object, especially ourselves. To state the question and briefly describe the 2 kinds of emptiness. So first of all is, once you start to talk about the emptiness of ourselves, right? What's the next, the emptiness, I mean, if I talk about the emptiness of the fork, you know, or the emptiness of my hand, that's one thing. But then what would, as you examine the fork and you say, well, the fork is made up of, I don't know, handle and tines and shape, or however you want to describe it. But when you start to look at that and you break it down, then what's the next natural question that arises in your mind? You say, the fork is comprised of these parts which are assembled, which my mind assembles and calls a fork, right? My mind says there's a flat thing with a shape, you know, and there's tines and the right size and all the rest, and I'll call it a fork. So if I do that analysis and I say, okay, there's a lot of parts here that my mind turns into the fork, right? What's the natural question that arises? Sorry? Go ahead, what did you say? Go ahead. Go for it.
Emptiness of the parts.
Yeah, I mean, what about the tines? Is there really a tine there? Is there really a handle there? Is there really a handle there?
There's the front of the handle, the side of the handle.
But is there a handle?
Projected handle, yes.
Yeah, you project a handle. Like you project a tine, right? Now, you just keep going, right? You have an infinite regression, right? So you can say, so then what, right? So we start to examine the next level down, and what do we find?
Nothing.
I wouldn't say nothing.
We find that it's unfindable.
Yeah, I mean,
That you can keep going and
Keep finding more parts.
yeah. So we start to say, look, no matter how far down you go, it's like peeling the onion, right? You peel off another layer and you say, oh, well, there's just more parts. You go down and you break up those parts and you say, oh, there's just more parts. Ad infinitum, right? You can never get to a point where there's not a left side and a right side, right? Or an inside and an outside. And so you don't find any parts. You don't find an end to parts. You don't find any smallest God particle ever. You know, you don't find any raw material. You can't ever find a building block of matter on a physical level, right? So that's the idea. So we begin, you know, we look at the raw data and we understand that even the raw data is a concept imposed upon parts, right? At whatever level we're examining, whether it's at the minuscule level or at the level of the tine or at the level of the handle or the level of the fork. All of those are just concepts at a different level, right? How does the process of going down in levels through the parts and the parts of the parts and so on work as a method to establish that things are actually empty? Well, when you look for self-existent raw data, which we're projecting onto, you don't find it, right? Like, if I look for the tine, I can't find a tine because I can say, well, there's no self-existent tine. There's a curve, there's a flatness, you know, there's a taper. All those things put together are what I'm calling tine. Metal, right? Oh, well, let me break down, you know, that further, right? And on and on and on. So that's how you establish the truth of emptiness, is by going down through the parts of the parts, right? So you never find anything as you go down. There is no objective reality. There is no smallest building block. There is no instant of consciousness, right? And all of those things are projection. All of those things are ideas, right? As we did in our meditation at the beginning of class, right? I mean, to really get this and to really understand it, we have to ask for blessings from teachers and lamas, right? We talked about that also. To really get it, you have to ask for a blessing. But then when you ask a teacher to bless your mind, who are you asking? Yeah. So, because what is a teacher, right? What is a lama? A lama is a series of parts that you're imposing the concept onto of teacher. You know, there's a basis there for your imputation of holy teacher, right? Virtuous being, and then but it's coming from you. It's coming from your mind, right? You're the one who is projecting the holy being, right? So, you know, you're actually asking, when you say, please bless me, Holy Lama, right? In a way, you're speaking to your own projection, right? You're speaking to the projection of your mind, right? But then who are you? And what is your mind? So you have to cook it. Meditate on it, right? What's this say? Okay. Why don't either of these two kinds of raw data, you know, atoms or moments of consciousness, exist? We imagine at the most basic levels of building blocks, physical matter, atoms, are only a projection on the smaller parts, each side, and so on endlessly. We imagine the most basic unit of awareness, the present moment, is a projection at its start, its duration, and its end, and so on endlessly, right? A moment of time can always be split further, right? Every moment has a beginning, a duration, and an end. There is no starting, abiding, or stopping of anything. If you look at anything, nothing starts, and nothing abides, and nothing stops. Because there is no instant that you can define as an instant from its own side. There is no moment which has the smallest beginning, duration, and end. Every moment can become a smaller moment. There is no moment. So, at the smallest level of physical and mental stuff, there's no objective reality, right? And that's emptiness, right? There is no self-existent anything at the smallest level of mind or matter. What's the whole point of looking at the world this way? Why do we care? Why are we talking about this? What's the point?
And suffering of all living beings.
Yeah, by understanding how things exist and how things don't exist, we say, oh, if I collect the right karma, I could take raw data and perceive it as anything. There is no atom, there is no self-existent moment of mind, there is only perception, awareness, karmic ripening. Right? By collecting the right karma, I have the right perception and I have the right experience of reality. Right meaning the one I want, meaning one that's not suffering, meaning one that's paradise, right? By collecting the karma, by collecting the appropriate karma, I cause my perception to function so that non-self-existent data is perceived as paradise. These non-existent particles, non-existent smallest particle of mind and matter, right, can be perceived as anything. There is no self-existent matter and there is no self-existent mind. Right? There's only perception. What causes my perception? The way in which my mind is moving and functioning. What causes the way in which my mind is moving and functioning? Past imprints, past impulses, past karmas, right? So the point of all this, the point of talking about all this, the point of the wisdom chapter is understanding that by doing good deeds and planting good karmic seeds, we create a Buddha paradise, an angel's body, perfect compassionate mind, and reach the end of suffering, birth, aging, illness, and death, as promised by Lord Buddha. That's the point of all this. Name and describe the meaning of the names. Don't worry, we're halfway done. Name and describe the meaning of the names, each of the three kinds of compassion presented by Master Chandrakirti in his commentary upon Arya Nagarjuna's root wisdom. Alright, this compassion which focuses upon simple living beings, like there's a homeless smelly guy and he's hungry and let me give him some food because he needs it and he's hungry. That's one kind of compassion, right? Just simple, ordinary, unexamined compassion. Straightforward, no problem, right? And then there's compassion, which is called compassion which focuses upon things. Meaning, a person understands that the suffering being is changing instant by instant. They're not self-existent. Like there's the smelly homeless guy. He's not a self-existent smelly homeless guy. He's changing constantly. You know, he might be happy one moment. He might be unhappy the next moment. He's not a self-existent anything. But you know, he's a smelly homeless guy, and so I'm going to feed him. Right? So there's more wisdom in that, right? They understand that the person is not some self-existent, unchanging being, as in the first one. There's more understanding in that. And then the other kind of compassion is compassion which focuses upon nothing or emptiness, the emptiness of the person, right? Which is basically understanding that they're suffering because they collected the karma in the past to suffer. Right? This person was, you know, harmful to others, and so they're sick. This person didn't feed people, and so they're hungry. You know, etc., etc., etc. And you know, I understand the karmic causes of this, and I understand why it's going on, and I feel compassion for them, and you know, I'll help them in their context. All right? Okay. Good. Our impure capacity to have good and bad feelings, both physical and mental, plays a large role in creating a suffering world. So much so that the ability to feel was thought to be a whole separate heat or part of the body by Lord Buddha. Quote the lines from the Abhidharma Kosha, Treasure House of Higher Knowledge, by Master Vasubandhu, describing the role of feeling. So remember that we said, you know, there are 46 mental functions, we said, right? You have your main mind, which is basically sentience, awareness, right? And then you have all the things going on within your awareness and sentience, right? All these different mental functions. And yet, two of the mental functions were singled out as being heaps, right? And more important than all of the other mental functions, right? So, the text says, they are the root of conflict and the cause of cyclic life, a reason for the order. Feeling and discrimination among the mental functions are set apart as heaps. So feeling and discrimination are two mental functions which are very extremely important to understand suffering and why suffering occurs. right? And of all the different ways in which our mind functions, discriminating, this is good, this is bad, I like this, I don't like that, one of them, right? And feeling is the other, right? So people engage in conflict because they distinguish between me and mine. And people want to avoid what feels bad and get what feels good. And so they collect karma based upon that. You know, you have feeling, right? You have a feeling, I like that, I don't like that, I want that, I don't want that, right? And discrimination. Both of those things are at work, right? That's a good thing and I want it. That's a bad thing and I don't want it. So you have feeling and discrimination at work, which is motivating us to generally behave in a non-virtuous way and collect karma and suffer. So that's why those two things are cycled out. So the 5 heaps are listed in order of relative subtlety. Physical matter is the most coarse heap, and consciousness is the most subtle heap. So physical matter being the most gross, then feeling is next because it's done with your hand or your touch, right? Which is made of physical matter. Discrimination is most gross among mental functions because it draws distinction, like, don't like, good or bad. And then other factors such as the hope to not suffer, and then finally consciousness is the most subtle. So that's the order of the 5 heaps. What makes a feeling impure? I mean, is it bad to feel? Are all feelings impure? Are all feelings suffering? I would have said yes in my younger days. Don't feel anything, please. Sorry, I digress. What makes a feeling impure? Ignorance, yeah, self-existence, right? Mistakenly thinking that the goodness or badness is resident in the object and therefore doing negativity towards it. Right? Being willing to do bad deeds to obtain a good feeling or avoid a bad feeling. Right? Give a general description of the object which the middle way denies. Describe what emptiness is empty of. And give a metaphor. What is emptiness empty of? That's a sexy one, right?
Self-existence.
Yes, can you describe it? Emptiness is empty of a self-existent thing, which in Tibetan is called a gakcha. Emptiness is empty of a gakcha, self-existent thing, which is what? What is a self-existent thing?
Never be there.
It's something which could never be, right? It doesn't exist, it never did exist, and it can't exist. What is it? It's like a riddle, right?
It's something with no beginning and no end, that can't be used and no one can perceive.
No, I didn't say that. It's something which exists without being a group of parts conceptualized in a certain way by our karma, right? It's a thing which could exist without being a group of parts that we're forced by our past karma to perceive a certain way, right? A self-existent thing would be a thing that exists not as a group of parts and not as a function of our labeling and conception forced upon us by our past karma. Right? Like a full-size, 2-headed purple elephant in this room. Doesn't exist, won't exist. Just like this thing existing as a pretzel from its own side. The self-existent pretzel, chocolate-covered peanut butter-filled pretzel, would be a pretzel that existed that way, without there being the chocolate, without there being the pretzel, without there being the peanut butter, without me calling it all a tasty treat. Right? Describe 3 different interpretations of what dependent origination means. Thomas, dependent origination, you did it before.
I can't remember.
depending on its parts, depending on its causes and conditions, and depending on its projection. Is that what you're looking
Yes, and state the Buddhist school that believes each.
The functionalist.
And explain why the next is more correct than the preceding. Go for it.
The functionalists, which includes the Abhidharma, the Sautantrika, and I can't remember the other ones.
Mind only.
Mind only are the ones that say things are dependent on their causes and condition.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing that they deny, the gacha, is anything that could possibly exist without its causes and condition. A tree without seeds and water and so on.
Good.
Then the next one is the Majjhimika, but not the Prasangika, the other one that I can't say.
Middle way.
Yeah.
Independent group.
In the independence school, and that they say that dependent origination is anything that's dependent on its parts, because they say although the functionalists are correct, they're missing a few things like space and so on, which you can include in parts by saying there's direction up and down, and the rest of the saying that's dependent. Anything there's nothing that could exist. The gacha is anything. Nothing could exist in that school that does not have parts. And the Majjhimika Prasangika is saying that dependent origination is that although those are okay, ultimately there can never be a single thing that exists without a mind imputing, projecting a name and a label on those parts or things or so on. So the thing that denies that.
So why is that explanation better than the other two? I mean, let's recap the three explanations. So the lowest explanation of dependent origination is things exist in dependence upon causes, right? Things are caused. Nothing exists without a cause, right? Okay, that's the first group. So things originate in dependence upon causes, dependent origination. Second group, things exist in dependence upon parts. Things originate in dependence upon parts, right? Third group, things originate in dependence upon your conceiving of them and projecting them the way you do, right? So why is the third group better, more better?
You can get enlightened.
Right, it's the basis to become enlightened. Exactly. Well done. Redeemed yourself from earlier answers.
Hey, come on, guys, come on.
That's easy. So, yeah, exactly. Perfect. You know, this understanding provides us with the basis to get enlightened. You know, to say, well, okay, things have parts, and that's their ultimate the ultimate meaning of everything, and that's the ultimate nature of everything, and so, yeah, there's some beautiful lady there, and she's a bunch of parts, and so, there you go. Not as useful as saying, you know, there's a beautiful lady there, and she exists in dependence upon my projecting her and conceiving of her as a beautiful lady because of my virtue in the past, and therefore I better be virtuous in the present for the future. That's, you know, how you get enlightened, is based upon the highest view, right? Makes sense?
Yeah. I experienced it recently by listening to a teaching, Hinayana teaching on parts, and they're saying that the flower is not a flower, it's made up of non-flower things like water and cloud, and it was lovely, but it didn't free anybody, you know, it didn't
get you anywhere.
No, it felt nice.
Yeah.
You felt all together, but it didn't allow. I saw the power of the Prasangika's perspective.
Yeah, because it's an antidote, right? It's like, you know, in those systems they say, look, if you see a beautiful person, don't desire them. Just think about their parts. You know, well, maybe not helpful.
It's fine.
It's like, it's like, no, I say, think of them as skin and blood and bones and veins and pus and, you know, right? Mucus, and think of all the things that make them up, and then you won't desire them. Well, that's, you know, that's an antidote of sorts. You know, but it's a lower approach. It isn't as powerful to become enlightened. You see. So, okay. Master Shantideva says there's no difference between reaching nirvana and not reaching nirvana. He's referring to an idea known as the equivalence of nirvana in the suffering world. Explain his real intent in making this statement.
that there's no difference between nirvana and samsara. It's just about what we project onto the situation.
They're both empty, right? I mean, there's no difference in them in that they're both a basis of projection, right? So samsara is empty, nirvana is empty. Both conditions depend upon the state of our mind. You know, it's not like samsara is a place and nirvana is a place, and if you pick door number 1 instead of door number 2, you're in nirvana instead of samsara, right? I mean, both of them are blank screens, you know, which we project upon according to the composition and content of our mind and inner landscape, right? So he's saying, you know, look, guys, they're both empty of any nature of their own. There isn't some self-existent nirvana where when you get there, you're all of a sudden like in the room where the bliss is showering down on you, and so you're in bliss. It's not like it's no self-existent bliss. There's no self-existent nirvana. Nirvana is a mental state, your mental state. The only way you get nirvana or experience nirvana is by having a mind which is free of every affliction and suffering, right? And why would your mind be free of every affliction and suffering? Because you don't have any more negative karma left to flower to cause you any affliction or suffering. And how do you not have any negative karma in your mind? By being virtuous all the time and purifying all your past negative karma. And that's how you get to nirvana. And what gives you the capacity to do that? Seeing emptiness directly. Because as we sit here going like, I want to be a virtuous person, screw you, asshole, you know, but I'm really going to try to be a virtuous person. You're such a schmuck, you know. You know, I mean, we have a very limited mental capacity, right? We have, you know, impulsive, you know, emotional, all this other stuff going on. Yeah, dude.
It's weird.
No, go ahead.
It's off topic.
I don't care.
Okay. Just a question of what's better karma. For example, if I was someone, most people don't want to see emptiness directly in their life. If I was someone who was practicing, and I understood emptiness very deeply, and I worked on understanding emptiness very deeply, but I did not ultimately see emptiness directly. Is that better karma than someone who sees, for example, the Dalai Lama self-existently as perfect and divine, and then literally self-existently sees it that way and serves that person fully, like none of us would ever believe, and really doesn't have any deep understanding of emptiness? Which one's a better karma?
Well, first thing to say is you know, the teachings say, think of yourself as the only person here who's not enlightened. And everyone else here, everyone else in the world, is an enlightened being manifesting the Nirmanakaya, their forms, to do everything necessary to bring you to enlightenment. And so in fact, think of yourself as the only one who hasn't seen emptiness directly. So the idea that most people don't see emptiness could be disputed. Just to put that out there. Because unless we can read someone else's mind, we have no idea who's who. You know, they could just be actors on the play. Saying, you know, dude, we're trying to bring you along here, doing everything possible to teach you what you need to know to, you know, get you out of suffering, and yeah. So think like that, possibly. So to answer your question, the scriptures address it very clearly and specifically. We're at the end of the wisdom chapter. I'm not sure whether it's appropriate to mention or not, but at the end of the wisdom chapter.
You started already.
What is it?
It's more virtuous to prostrate to a blank wall that you see as empty than it is to build a monastery, the scripture said. Think of a self-existent monastery. I'm building a self-existent monastery. Build self-existent monks, building self-existent virtue. The scriptures say it's more virtuous to prostrate to the wall with the correct understanding of emptiness than to build a monastery. So, Which is not to say you shouldn't build a monastery. Go build monasteries. Or do whatever external self-existent virtue there is. And you know, the nature of the human mind is to see things as self-existent. And so the teachings are full of methods to use self-existence as a path of virtue. So we can't discount that and can't say, kind of can't say it's not important, can't de-emphasize it or undermine it in some way. You know, the normal human mind will see everything as self-existent. So the teachings are very skillful in saying, you know what, let's just trick you into doing self-existent virtue, because otherwise you're just going to do self-existent non-virtue. So we'll just teach you to do things self-existently, because that's where you're at. You know, here's a self-existent this, and here's a self-existent that, and here's a self-existent, you know, Tara, and here's a self-existent Dalai Lama, and here's a self-existent Chenrezig, and you know, here's a self-existent monastery, and you go play with your self-existent toys. You know, do your self-existent virtue, and you'll be better off than you were otherwise. But if you can go further than that, you know, if you can go beyond self-existent virtue, you know, and self-existent holy beings, and get to understanding the nature of perception and projection and mental functioning and virtue and karma and emptiness, then you're at the essence of the practice. You know, you're at the heart of the teaching. You know, all of these countless teachings are for wisdom. You know, it says, and we didn't get to it, we skipped over that one. It's, you know, one of the questions that's not on the final that we had in our homework, which is, you know, it says, you know, all of the perfections that came before are for the sake of wisdom. You know, the first 5 perfections are for the sake of wisdom that came before, right? Everything is to lead to wisdom. Wisdom, obviously with love and compassion, is the heart of the teaching and the practice and what we're trying to get to. Why? It's the path of seeing. We're talking about the path of seeing. What's the first path? Path of accumulation. Path of accumulating virtue. Why are we accumulating virtue? So that we can see emptiness. And then next is path of preparation, where you're preparing to see emptiness. Next is the path of seeing, where you're seeing emptiness. Next is the path of habituation, where you're using emptiness to get rid of all your mental afflictions. Then you're enlightened on the 5th path. See a common theme here? You know, all 5 Buddhist paths are about emptiness. Right? Okay.
I was going to say the common theme was path, but that's okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
It's okay.
I had to.
Alright, we did the... What's the relationship between natural nirvana and regular nirvana? Because all objects have natural nirvana, which is what? Emptiness. It's possible to achieve regular nirvana and Buddhahood, which is a state of mind with no mental afflictions, right? Since our good karma will force us to see our minds and world as totally pure. That is what nirvana is. It's a projection forced upon us by our past karma of having a mind free of suffering and afflictions. Are there self-existent little black afflictions in our mind? Well, there's not even a mind to have little black things in, right? So, you know, when we attain nirvana, we will be having a projection forced upon us by our past karma of a completely pure, happy, blissful mind with no problems. It's a projection forced upon us by our past karma. What kind of karma? Pure karma. If we have impure karma, it won't be the perception and the experience and the reality of happiness and virtue. Right? Okay. Explain the best method for truly understanding the classical proofs of emptiness. Pretty please, right? Not quite. Sort of. The best method is to request blessings of the root and lineage lamas, which are not self-existent. Right? When you supplicate a lama, when you supplicate a holy being, are they there?
Not self-existent.
Not self-existently. What is there?
Your holy projection, your projection of holiness, your projection of wisdom, your projection.
Your projection of virtue, your projection of goodness, your projection of holiness, your projection of wisdom is there, right? So who are you talking to? Right? So, nonetheless, and because of that, the most powerful and important thing to do to understand emptiness and to perceive emptiness and to make progress in penetrating into ultimate reality is to ask for the blessings of holy beings and your teachers and the ones that you're most closely connected with. To ask their blessings and make supplications. Then describe the principal benefit of performing an act of dedication and the principal problem of failing to do so. Virtues that would have created only small spiritual results bring more powerful results if you dedicate. Okay? Especially if you dedicate to total enlightenment for the benefit of others. If you don't dedicate virtues, they tend to wear out and bring small results like, chocolate covered pretzels. I dedicate eating this to everyone. Okay? As he closes his presentation on the stages of the path, Master Shantideva dedicates the virtue to the continued flourishing of the Buddhist teachings in the world, using a metaphor to describe them. To state and explain the metaphor. Buddhism is the one and only medicine that can cure all the suffering of living kind. During the guide, he's proved that emptiness and karma are the only worldviews which are complete and beneficial to help all living beings eliminate their pain. And so now he's dedicating the immense virtue of having written the guide to the continued flourishing of the teachings and view of karma and emptiness in the world. And then finally describe and explain the final act of Master Shantideva in the classic guide to the spiritual, guide to the Bodhisattvas way of life. What is his final act? The last line.
He prostrates to his lama.
Yeah, he bows down to his teacher who's responsible for spreading the teachings and all the goodness in his heart, in his own heart. His point is that all spiritual progress that we can make is a result of holy teachers. And it all begins and ends with finding a heart teacher and serving them. And for Master Shantideva, this is Manjushri himself. And so he's acknowledging that it's not possible to attain our higher spiritual goals without someone to teach us. It's like saying I can learn to be a classical pianist without a teacher, or I can learn to, compete in the Olympics, without a coach or without a teacher, or, I've gotten lost in the jungle of the rainforest, and I can find my way out by myself, So it's impossible to think that we can become a master of anything without a teacher, especially something which is deeply profound. And so he's acknowledging that, and he's really reminding us that we have to connect with the teacher and collect the karma relative to the teacher to manifest more and more pure and more holy teachings. And so to the extent that we are engaging holy beings and teachers properly, we have a basis to collect the karma which can ripen into more teachings and more teachers. Okay? And if we do not collect that karma, then there's nothing to ripen into more teachers and more teachings. So very important to understand the nature of teachers, where they come from, what they are, what caused them, and if you want to have more and better holy teachers in your life, to collect the appropriate causes to manifest that, not because it's resident in any teacher, but because you are causing it and projecting it and perceiving it validly for yourself as your valid reality. Right? See you in
Holy Teacher, we're having dinner next week,
Oh,
aren't we?
go for it.
Yeah, so we're doing the final exam here.
Okay.
Yeah, for like half an hour on Tuesday. and then we're invited, all of us, to Zampa, which is the Tibetan restaurant. Please,
Okay,
yeah,
I'll go.
yeah, good.
I'm
So
going.
let's have dinner with Lama Jona. So thank you for an entire year of Bodhisattva's way of life, for every essence of your teaching, every realization you share with us, every bit of your life force given to us. Really grateful, please.
What time?
Whatever you say.
Well, you're gonna do a final, right?
Yeah. So if we meet at 7:30, we can have dinner at 8. Yeah, half an hour for a final, and we can do the final.
It's not going to take. It's going to take.
You're not gonna get a final done in half an hour.
You really?
I mean, we have been doing the final on our own. If we want to do that on our sister's
also
file.
And then have a half an hour here to finish it, maybe.
Yeah.
Do
Is
you
that
want to do your finals on your own?
Or we could come earlier and do it.
It's not necessary to do the final here unless you really want to.
Right, and then.
So bring your final here at 7:30, and if you're not finished or have to sign whatever, you'll be here to take them. Yes, right. So then we'll hand in our homework, final at 7:30, and whenever we're all done, we can go.
Yeah, and if it's at 7:30, you can bring your kids.
Yeah, I'll bring the wee ones then.
Okay, great. That would be lovely.
So meet at Sampa at 7:30. Is that the idea?
Does that work for everyone?
Yeah.
Meet at Zampa at 7:30. Good.
Wait.
Yeah.
I'll be here at
Why
7.
don't we
If
here?
you want to come, or I can take your.
We can give her
final
the
at
exams there.
restaurant.
Yeah. Zampa at 7:30.
Does everyone know where Sampa is?
9th Street
Yeah.
and 3rd Avenue.
Like 5 minutes.
It's one block.
Yeah.
1 block on 9th Street, please. Yeah. 7:30 at Zampa. I'll put it up on the Facebook. Thank you immensely for your teachings. Sashi Fuki Jishin Metal Riro Lin Xin Yinde Yampadi Sangye Shindu Mite Ruargi Dropun Namda Shinla Chikasho Hirang Guru Dapnamandala Punyatayan Gyadi Gyoku Sunam Yeshe Zokzok Shin Sunam Yeshe Lejin Hui Ramba Kuni Topasho.
By the power of our studying and practicing this guide to the Bodhisattva's way of life for the past year, may we sweetly and beautifully engage in the 6 perfections. May we quickly realize emptiness, perceive ultimate reality, attain complete enlightenment, and bring an end to all suffering, all beings everywhere in this very life.
Thank you for teaching.
Thank you. It's a great, sweet, beautiful, wonderful year. Thank you.
More. More.
More what?
More teachings.
More teaching? More better?
Is it more better?
All
teaching?
better.
Yeah.
Teach course 14.
Sorry?
Teach them course 14.
Will I teach course 14? One thing at a time. 13 is next.
Yes.
13 will start way before that starts.
In the middle of July.
July, it's
25?
Tuesday and Thursday. It's going to be Tuesday and
23,
Thursday. The 23rd, is it?
23rd is Tuesday,
Okay.
and then 25th is Thursday.
Okay, so it'll be July 23rd.
July.
And Eva is a profound meditator, and great scholar, and practitioner, and great yogi, and logician, and debater, and Tibetan and Sanskrit, linguist, and all the rest. So.
Should we do anything special for him?
Sure.
You suggest?
I'd suggest you do something special.
Okay. Thank you.